Folks, Denny Carter here with episode 13 of the Dad Season Show. And I am going to start this broadcast with my thoughts on what else but dude wipes. That's right. We're talking dude wipes because today's topic, as you may have gleaned from the show title, is toxic masculinity and or positive masculinity, trying to get away from the former into the latter. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I thought it tied in nicely with all the ads I'm seeing for dude wipes. Now, I guess what I'm going to say here is going to ensure that the Dad Season Show will never get that sweet dude wipe ad money, and that's unfortunate. And dude wipes, if you're listening, we can talk. But I do find it funny. I do find it funny that men apparently need a special kind of butt wipe, that we cannot simply use what are called baby wipes. We have to use something called a dude wipe. It is the exact same thing. It is a wet wipe for wiping our butts. But we are made to feel insecure about using baby wipes or calling them baby wipes. I can't tell the guys at work that I'm using baby wipes to get that smooth wipe. Keep things clean, keep things under control where it counts. I gotta get the manly version. I gotta get the dude wipe. Or who am I? Am I really a man if I'm using a baby wipe? The answer, is yes. Yes, when you have kids and when they're babies and you're basically spending like 12 to 15% of your monthly income on baby wipes, you end up using them for yourself. I speak from experience here, okay? And it's okay to do that. It's okay that the wipes are used to wipe a baby's bottom and your bottom. That's fine. There's no shame in that. You shouldn't feel less like a man for using a baby wipe. You should just think of it as good hygiene rather than a statement about your masculinity, the lack thereof, the excess of, things of that nature. Anyway, you may, if you're watching this on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, or on YouTube live, it is nighttime here on the East Coast, the only legitimate time zone, 8:30 here. I usually record this at 1 o'clock, and I did record this at 1 o'clock on Monday, but I lost internet. The Comcast Corporation makes a great internet product. That's what I'll say about that. I've never had a problem as long as I've had it for 5 years now. But today there was a massive outage, and I was one of the people to lose internet for, 4 to 6 hours. And it came right in the middle of the Dad Season Show broadcast. So we had to start again. Which is, it's tough, but we're gonna soldier through. We're gonna soldier through. Jump in the live chat if you are seeing this. I see Toronto Dave, my guy, in the chat here. We're gonna talk about masculinity that is not so bad, that is not horrifying. That is the goal of today's show. Hence, I thought that we could start by talking about wiping our butts, because everything has to be manly, right? Everything. And it's like the avoidance of femininity is like a hallmark of what I'll call traditional masculinity. Now, we're gonna get into this discussion. We're gonna get into the meat of the show, the show's meat. And I'm going to try not to say toxic masculinity 500 times because, whereas 10 years ago, I think that was a phrase, a concept reserved for a college or university classroom, a lecture hall, a 200 level sociology class. I remember those. They made me woke and subsequently, of course, broke. But nevertheless, we persist. Anyway, so this phrase, toxic masculinity, has emerged from academia into the popular culture, into movies, into music, into everything. And now it's widely used and widely discussed. And that's good. I think there is a positive to that. I do also think that the term toxic masculinity is thrown around a little loose and can be somewhat of a turnoff to folks, guys, and women, because you hear it so often, and it's used in a way that condemns men. Um, and even when it's not used in that way, I think it can be interpreted in bad faith as condemning all men, to say, "Oh, okay, so what you're saying is all men are inherently bad, cannot be reformed, cannot be made better. So you're saying my boys, my sons, are just bad people. That's what you're saying when you say toxic masculinity." And of course, that's not what anyone is saying. But it can be interpreted that way, maybe sometimes in good faith. I would venture to say mostly it's interpreted that way in utter bad faith, you know. But I'm going to try not to use that. I'm going to try to use the word traditional masculinity because that is the masculinity of our fathers and our grandfathers. Okay. And we remember that. And I think we recognize that. And as a generation, obviously, I've said many times on the Dad Season show, fortunately, I do speak for all millennials. Um, you can look it up. And I would say that we, as a generation, are not as interested in following in those footsteps. That we, because of differing and evolving socioeconomic circumstances, cultural circumstances, that traditional masculinity doesn't fit the way that it used to. We'll get into that in a minute. It never really fit for everybody. It was always harmful to somebody. But today, I do think that there's less interest in following that path. There's still a lot of interest, I will say. So like a lot of people making a lot of money on the internet pushing that form of masculinity. But I want to talk about a different form of masculinity. Before I do that, I want to again thanks for the folks for joining the show live. And I want to remind you, you can find the Dad Season show on Spotify, on iTunes. We have seen a lot of growth. Me and the interns, the unpaid interns, the Dad Season show, we've seen a lot of growth in subscriptions and in listens on the podcasts. And we appreciate that. So let's keep that going. I would love if you could like and or subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps me out a lot. It helps me make friends with the algorithm. So thank you for that. And then, of course, you can sign up for the Dad Season Show Patreon if you would like to support the show. I recently wrote a short essay on being an example to your children. Here, I'll post that in the chat if folks want to check it out. Just real quickly, I'll just talk about that, and then we'll get to the meats, the the meat of the show, the show's meat. So I do think part of something, I've said many times on this show that a big shortcoming for me as a parent is to try to find the easy way out, look for the easy way out, and or take the easy way out as far as parental choices go. And being an example for your kids is hard. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of commitment. And here's what's easier than being an example is just not being an example. And so for a long time as a parent, it's I don't really know why, beyond being lazy or just not wanting to deal with it, not wanting to do the hard thing. I don't really have an excuse, but for a long time I said, you know what? I'd rather tell my kids how to act and what to do in certain circumstances than show them. That sounds better to me. That sounds like a much easier, more straightforward way to deal with the issues for me as a dad, is just to tell them this is how you should react. This is what you should do. In when you get mad, when you get angry, disappointed, sad, here, just do those things. Simply do those things and it'll be fine. You'll be fine. But it turns out actually showing them how to deal, how to cope, is quite powerful. And I had an example in this essay if folks want to check it out. Me and my son, having something of a conflict. Actually can't even remember what it was about, honestly. But I was getting worked up, as you do. He was worked up big time. And there was I got to the point where I knew where this was going. I knew this was going to a bad place, okay, between me and my son. And I didn't want it to go there, and I wanted to hit the brakes before it got there. So I remembered all the stuff I've read about showing your kid how to cope with strife, say, okay, with conflict. And I said, okay, all right, I'll try. And applying these things in the moment is always difficult. It's easy to talk about them. I could get on air like I am and talk about it all day. It's no problem. No problem. The theory of it, the process of it, easy to talk about, harder to do. But I was able to kind of reel it in, pull back a little bit, and I said, okay, I'm going to sit down on my son's beanbag chair, like I'm in 1986. Beanbags, huge in the 80s, obviously. And I'm going to take some deep breaths. So I sat down and I took deep breaths. I took 10, 12 deep breaths. And out of the corner of my eye, I see my son watching me. And he starts to calm down. And he starts to take, I wouldn't call them deep breaths, but cleansing breaths, a little bit deeper than his normal breath. Okay. So he wasn't doing exactly what I was doing, but he was definitely making an effort to try to chill. And this took 30 seconds, took 45 seconds, something like that. And we were able to talk about it with cooler heads. The cooler heads prevailed. Sometimes they do. And the conflict was over and we came to a resolution, and that was that. Now, again, this show is not about how great I am as a parent. The show is actually about the catastrophic mistakes I've made over and over and over again as a dad that I'm begging you not to make as you either enter dad season or are in the midst of dad season, whatever part of dad season you're in. So this is not a sick brag. Oh, wait, I've never been in conflict. Of course, I've been in terrible conflicts with my kids. Okay, I like very bad, very very bad. And you embrace that authoritarian mindset. And the authoritarian mindset doesn't require deep breathing. It doesn't require example setting, right? It doesn't require any of that because you are the authoritarian. You are the unelected dictator of your kids, and they shall not question you. That is not part of the program with authoritarianism, right? Let me take a sip of my seltzer. Right? So you shift from that authoritarian model to the authoritative model. And buddy, let me tell you, the authoritative model has a lot of example showing, a lot of showing in general. To your kids. I talked about authoritarian versus authoritative on one of the dad season show episodes if folks want to check that out. But I just wanted to share that with folks. I wrote about it on the Patreon. You can check it out there. All right. Now we're on to forms of masculinity that might be not quite as terrible as traditional masculinity. Just so everybody's clear and everybody's on the same page, I wanted to define traditional masculinity. So there's the aforementioned avoidance of femininity. Man, that's a hard word to say. There's rigidity of thought. There's negativity toward sexual minorities, aka transphobia, homophobia, radical self-reliance, aggression or toughness, status and dominance, and being restrictive emotionally. Now, a lot of these things are tied in to each other, and I just wanted to tie in. I think the best connecting pieces here of traditional masculinity, which is the emotional restriction and the what I'll call radical self-reliance. I'm not breaking news by saying that boys are raised to not seek help, because if you need help, you are admitting a weakness. You are conceding that you are not strong enough to deal with something on your own, by yourself, to figure it out. And this is, we're taught, a failure of the alpha male. You cannot be a dominant alpha type if you require help. You just can't. And so this ties into the emotional restrictions, because you're not going to seek help, and you're not going to let anybody see that you need help. So you're going to restrict the kind of feelings, kind of emotions that you see, that you want to show, or that you may be feeling, but you're going to restrict those. You say, no, nobody else is going to see this shit inside of me. Nobody. Because I'm a guy, and guys don't do that. That's for girls, right? And those two things, the self-reliance and just being very restricted emotionally, I think, are very closely connected. And that's still taught. That's still very much taught today in popular culture, aka YouTube. We have a lot of filters applied to my kids' YouTube channels and whatever. But occasionally I will see stuff sneak through, especially my son's YouTube stuff, where you'll have an Andrew Tate type, okay? An Andrew Tate clone who is pushing this aggressive, super harmful form of masculinity. What I would call a very dark version of masculinity, like a pitch black nightmare version of being a man. That's the vision that is broadcast on the internet all the time. Should it be? Should it be allowed? Should my kids be allowed to see it? I say no. I say no, but what do I know? Maybe that's a discussion for another time. So yeah, I mean, just to touch on some of the other things here, the status and dominance thing really jumps out, because you're as a guy, you're not taught to work in a team as part of a team. You're taught to lead, and then you're taught, if you're not a leader, if it turns out you're not a leader, you're weak and you're less of a man. And in fact, you might not even be a man, because you're not leading. What are you doing? Not leading. Only the leader is a true man. And this always raised the question, well, okay, what does that mean? What is it? As a kid, I thought, what is that? So that means what, like 0.01% of men are men? What are the rest of us? What are the rest of us? It is amazing how, and the avoidance of femininity will go to such extreme lengths. It's insane. It's insane. I remember growing up in elementary school, boys were not to wear pink shirts. I mean, nobody said it, but it was unspoken. It was an unspoken rule, but it was very well understood. You don't wear pink. You don't wear purple. You might not even wear yellow. Stick to the boy colors: blue, green, red, things of that nature. When you're doing art projects, for the love of God, don't use a pink marker. And this is where I should say, I remember, I think I was in third grade and we were doing some sort of project, and I wanted to use what was called in the 90s. Not only 90s kids will understand this, a hot pink. This is what we call it, a hot pink marker. I wanted to use it, not because I needed to for the project or anything necessarily. I mostly just wanted to trigger people because I knew I wasn't supposed to use it, right? This is as rebellious as I got. That and also painting my fingernails in senior year of high school. Those were the two most rebellious things I ever did in my life. Um, so I would use the hot pink marker and I would just look around like, you triggered? Are you upset? What's up? You upset? And they would, yeah, and actually they would be, and boys would be upset. What are you doing, man? You're embarrassing yourself. Don't do this. I know you'll be shocked to know I was a troll as early as 8 years old. Uh, but yeah, I mean, the avoidance of femininity is a hallmark of traditional masculinity. That goes back to the dude wipes, right? You're trying not to be feminine. You're saying, I want to wipe my butt and I want to be clean down there, but I'm not going to do it the girly way. Literally, whatever that is. I don't even know. I don't know. But we have this still steeped in the culture is this idea that you got to avoid girly stuff. And by the way, I will say, as a David Bowie diehard fan, I recommend folks, even if you're not a big fan, if you don't know anything about his discography except for Life on Mars or whatever, check out the song "Boys Keep Swinging." It is one of my favorites, and it really relates to this topic. So, we've defined traditional slash toxic masculinity, and I wanted to talk about some of the research I found, including from a professor at the University of New Brunswick, I believe. Here um, said, in our discussion of toxic masculinity, we should not take it so far as to demonize men entirely, losing space for compassion and a way forward. We also need to include in our discussions what comes after toxic slash traditional masculinity. The conversation is incomplete if we only focus on what men should not be and neglect noble qualities that men can strive for. And then I found this quote, which I thought was really good and really spoke to the issue of toxic versus positive masculinity. Jack Ryder, who is the head of an organization called Tomorrow Man, I believe it's based in Australia. It's dedicated to disrupting male stereotypes. He said this quote, "We're not trying to get rid of masculinity. We're just trying to expand it. All those traits about being stoic, having a good time, being athletic, being a leader, protecting yourself, and providing for your people, that's all great, but it's just not sustainable. If you can't cry, if you can't express emotion, if you can't ask for help, it's also just not sustainable." And yeah, I this from the guy Jack Ryder. I wanted to address just quickly about we're not trying this quote we're not trying to get rid of masculinity because I do think that there is a, a sense that anyone who challenges traditional masculinity is saying the mere concept of masculinity is bad and must be dispatched with forever. It has no place in modern society. And the pushback to that is not only does it have a place in modern society, what's ailing society at large, the reason why things are so bad in so many ways right now is because the proper hierarchy has been disrupted and must be reestablished with men at the top, with dominant men abiding by the strictures of traditional masculinity. They must be at the top, and everybody else will know their place then, just like they used to when things were good for everyone. Checking my notes, it's not actually. Actually, it was not good for everyone. It wasn't. It was quite. Yeah, I'm saying in my notes, it was quite bad for most people. That sort of hierarchy. I think anyone caught up on the idea of hierarchies is so full of fear that they can barely function in society. They're just bursting with fear. It's coming out of their eyeballs, out of their ears, out of their nostrils. They're so afraid. They're so afraid because someone who's obsessed with hierarchy assumes that everybody else is also obsessed with hierarchy and is trying to establish the hierarchy above them, to push them down in the hierarchy of power, of dominance. And so when you go around your everyday life thinking this way, then yeah, you're going to be afraid. But you don't have to be afraid. A lot of people don't think about hierarchy at all. I've read quite a bit recently about hierarchies of oppression, and we don't we don't have to abide by that. We can reject that if we want. And I do think that men, I don't, I speak for all millennials. I don't speak for all men, unfortunately. But I do think men have an important place in that discussion in saying no. No, we are not establishing hierarchy here. This is not what this discussion is about. So, just to be clear, just because someone says, "Hey, perhaps we should rethink masculinity. Perhaps we should make it slightly less toxic." They're not saying get rid of it. They're not saying you cannot be a man. That's not. No one is saying that. Maybe someone's saying that, but very, very small percentage, and they're not really part of the discourse. Okay. So that and that could be a bad faith interpretation. Oh, you're saying get rid of men. Well, let's just get rid of guys then. That sounds fine. No, no one is saying that. All right. All right. No, so to open the discussion about positive masculinity, I wanted to quote from a professor named Matt Englar Carlson, who has done a lot of research and writing on positive masculinity. He says, positive masculinity in it is a counterbalance to shame, which is truly the core emotion for understanding men. Positive masculinity offers growth and encouragement to men by focusing attention on what is possible and healthy in the lives of men. I that really struck me. I got caught on that. Positive masculinity is a counterbalance to shame. I think shame is used as almost a weapon against boys. Uh, to say, hey, you should, if you're feeling this way, if you're acting this way, you should feel shame because you have betrayed what you are, which is a male. And according to me, you need to be acting and thinking a certain way. If you venture outside those very strict confines, that very tight box of possibilities, then you're endangering your status as a man. And again, we can't emphasize this enough. You should feel shame. You should feel ashamed. And this idea is really hammered home, and it serves as a powerful weapon, a powerful incentive, I should say, to maintaining very strict ideas about what is and what is not masculine, because you don't want to be the one to challenge those. You just don't. You don't, especially when you're adolescence, when you're teenager, when you're in your early 20s in college or whatever. These are things you don't want to do. Well, I should say college is a little different, but adolescence certainly, I guess, at least when I was growing up, it's probably different today. It's probably different today, but when I was growing up, it was something you just wanted to steer clear of. I don't want to be called out for being a sissy. I don't want to be called out for being weak. This is literally the last thing that I want. Socially, it's a nightmare. Socially, it's a car crash for you, status wise, to venture outside the confines of traditional masculinity. And so the shame works. That is the thing about shame, unfortunately, that it really does work. And so expanding the definition of masculinity to include guys who are caretakers, guys who, you know, look out for others, who care for other people. And in the end, look at these are not perfect people, okay? Certainly, okay, they're still going to have many flaws. They're going to have shortcomings all over the place. But I'm just talking about what counts as masculine, and we're seeing that expand. You know, the caretaking, the domesticity, right? The sharing of responsibilities in the household. These can be things that men take on, and guess what? They're still dudes. They can still be dudes. You can still watch the game with the boys and have a beer or two and a half, like me. No more and no less than two and a half. You don't want to go crazy. So I do think that we need to push to expand what's possible there with what is and what is not masculine. And part of that is I and this is a hard part. This is the really hard part, and I fall short on this. But it's to call out those who reinforce the traditional masculinity. But as the literature says, you don't just call them out, you call them in too. And if you think calling them out is hard, calling them in is going to be even tougher, because what this means is you see someone, calling a boy a sissy, saying you throw like a girl. Okay, telling a girl that she shouldn't be playing football, she shouldn't be playing baseball, she should try softball. Things like that, right? Like reinforcing these gender stereotypes, whether it's with adults or with young people. And if you see that, you need to call it out if you're committed to this project of expanding what masculinity can be defined as. But then you need to call the person in and say, hey, like, do you understand? Do you understand why I did that? You understand why it's not great tell your son you throw like a girl? Like how harmful that is. As common as that phrase is, listen, I'm sure that I've said that phrase 100 times in my life. You throw like a damn girl. And it doesn't. I think a lot of guys would say, I don't say I have a daughter. I have a daughter. I can't say it now. I would never say it. I have a daughter. And that shouldn't matter. I'm sorry, it shouldn't matter. I have a wife. I have a mom. I have a sister. It doesn't. None of that shit matters. I'm sorry. I don't care that you have a wife and you have a daughter and you have 15 other female family members. I don't give a shit. It's you. That shouldn't change the way that you operate. Sorry. I'm sure it changes. It might change, like a guy who's very committed to the traditional masculine project. It might change that person, maybe, and maybe that's good. I don't know. But if you have to have a daughter in order to stop being an asshole, I don't know. I don't know. I think you should just stop being an asshole without having a daughter. That's probably the way to go. Like I don't want to have to depend on every asshole on the planet having one daughter in order to realize the error of his ways. That seems like a bad long-term plan, don't you think? So I don't want to hear anything about that. But yeah, I mean, but saying to someone, "Hey, you can't, you shouldn't be saying this." Like truly, and well, it's free speech. I can say what I want. Well, okay, fine. Yeah, you can say what you want. You sound like an idiot. You sound like an idiot, and you're harming the kid. You're damaging this child. So don't say it. Like keep that to yourself, or say it to your drinking buddies or whatever. Okay, but don't say it. So you need to call them in. Now, the other reason this is difficult is because guys who are all in, very committed to traditional masculinity, can be violent. They see the world as a dangerous place that calls for domination, that calls for degradation, where it's all against all. It's a Hobbesian nightmare, 24 hours a day. And so you must kill or be killed. I mean, and not literally, but figuratively speaking, in business, in life, in the community, you must dominate at all times. And so calling out someone with that sort of mindset, that's hard. That's tough. Sometimes I guess it's just not going to end well. I also don't want to be responsible for someone getting their ass beat because they called someone out for for reinforcing these gender stereotypes. So I'm hesitant to say that. I'm hesitant to, but it does make it intimidating. It certainly does. I'm gonna go to the comments here while I catch my breath. Toronto Dave in the chat, he says, my therapist told me being honest and vulnerable with emotions is one of the most masculine things one can do. And he also says, Toronto Dave says, it's scary how much it's scary. The show is resonating with my guy, Toronto Dave. But yeah, I mean, getting back to what he said originally, being vulnerable with emotions is one of the most masculine things uh, one can do. And I truly believe it is. I'm not just saying that as just to agree with the listener, to agree with I'm sure a lot of folks who are watching or listening. Like truly, I like when my kids, especially my sons, see me vulnerable. They've seen me upset. And I don't try to hide that from them. And it seems to break their heart when they do see it. And they definitely however they feel, they definitely are not looking down on me. I think you'll find that with kids is when you're a dad, when you're in dad season, if you show emotion in front of them, I mean, there's always anger, frustration, of course, of course. There's also sadness. And if you show them sadness, if you show them that sadness, if you show them, if perhaps you cry a little bit or something, you need a hug, you need an embrace, they'll look at that in a positive light. They'll say, man, even dad, even my tough dad needs comfort. Even my tough dad cries. I think that's good. I think it is good. It's hard. It is hard. But in the long run, I think you want your kids seeing that, at least sometimes, rather than never seeing it. I mean, what could be more effective in opening their minds to what is possible for men being men? Men cry. I was listening to the Creedence Clearwater Revival cover of "Heard It Through the Grapevine" this morning, and by the way, my daughter was super into it. God, great song. I need that song. The song's like 13 minutes long. I need it to be like 25 minutes long. And there's actually a line in there. What is the line? I know a man ain't supposed to cry. And my daughter asked me, what man ain't supposed to cry? Is that true? I mean, she said something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I said, no, no, it's not. Well, what's the song about? What's going on? I said, well, this guy, he's suffering some heartache. His girlfriend went with another guy, and he heard it through the grapevine. Well, what's a grapevine? And then the conversation went off the rails completely. But it's good to counterbalance that sort of thing with your kids, to say, yes, guys can get emotional. It's okay. I I don't know if he does it anymore because I don't really watch a lot of TV with my dad anymore, but I used to watch a lot of TV with my dad. For some reason, we used to watch Married with Children, which was a very awkward show to watch. Every time Christina Applegate came on the screen, it was just horribly uncomfortable to watch with your dad in 1994 or whatever it was. And anyway, we'd watch a lot of TV, and there would be phone commercials, and phone commercials used to be really emotional. Do you all remember this? Again, only 90s kids will remember, 80s kids too. But phone commercials used to always be about someone coming home from war and making a phone call to their significant other or their mom or their grandma and being like, "I'll be there soon." And it would be, like this stirring scene, right? And my dad used to cry. Dad used to bawl during these commercials. I think he would admit to that. It was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable because I remember thinking, "Are guys supposed to do this? Is this allowed? You're you're allowed to just break down, like, cry?" He used to cry at so many commercials. I'm sure there was, like, a Folgers commercial at some point that made him cry. Oh, man. But seeing your dad cry is way different than seeing your mom cry. Way different. It hits in a very particular way. And my dad is very much a traditionally masculine guy, very much. Uh, I don't even think I say toxic masculinity is a common phrase used in the culture. I'm pretty sure he's never heard it. He wouldn't even know what it means. It would take 15 minutes to break through just to tell him the definition. But all of that would melt away when he cried, all of it, and I'd be like, oh, he's just a person, he's just a person. He doesn't actually have any superpowers that keep him stoic 24/7. That's just that's just him white knuckling it through life. And honestly, guys, I don't want to white knuckle it. I don't. I would rather not constantly have my fists clenched trying to get through every day without showing any emotion. Sometimes you feel shitty. It's true. It doesn't mean you're always going to, but sometimes you do. And it's okay to show that. It's okay to tell your kids that instead of trying to fake it, I guess. I used to fake it with my kids a lot. But the thing is they could see through it. They could see through that I was upset. Are you sure, Dad? Are you sure you're right? I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you? What's wrong with you? How about you? How about you talk? We talk about how you're feeling, and you get defensive, and because you're trying to fight that shame, man, that shame monster is just lurking in the background, just waiting for you to admit that you're not abiding by the traditional masculine model. Oh, that shame monster's right there. Hey, don't tell your kid that you're not feeling good today. Don't say that you're sad. Don't say that you're down. I'm coming for you. You got to ignore that shame monster. You just gotta, or you can never change. You can never rope in other things and bring it into the masculine circle and create a more knocked over my mic almost a more positive kind of masculinity. One that sets an example, one that shows the kid what's possible. You don't always have to dress a certain way. You know, you don't always have to be tough. It's okay. It's okay. God, I feel so bad for the Andrew Tates of the world. I feel so bad. They're such pitiful figures. So much pain. you can just see it. Like, you can see in their eyes, there's so much pain from wherever, childhood, from adolescence, from where adulthood, and they don't even know it's there. And it's just eating them alive from the inside. And you're like, God, I wish you could see it. I wish you could see it because you're broadcasting that pain and that horror into the world, and you're turning other people into you. You know, you're taking your brain worms and throwing them into other people's brains, and they're burrowing deep, and they're becoming monsters like you. And behind it all is just pain and vulnerability and shame. Like I said, the darkest possible vision of what it is to be a man. And we as dudes, we have to reject this. As dads, you have to reject it. If you want the world to be even slightly better for your kids growing up. If you want your sons, your daughters to not grow up believing that masculinity is a very narrow thing. It starts with us. It does. And I don't want to say that because it sounds like an enormous task. I'd rather someone else do it, but I do think it starts with us. I appreciate you joining me, and I will talk to you next week, Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern, the only legitimate time zone. And until then, remain